Hey everybody, it's Ann Beebe. Today is Friday, March 13th, 2020. I'm Barb Hammer, so it's Friday the 13th. So I'm doing a video late in the evening, but it's a video I've wanted to do this week. And it's kind of touches upon a topic I've kind of talked about before. But anyway, this is specifically about International Women's Day on March 8th and how that annual event, annual holiday, has been hijacked for regime change operations, color revolutions. So I saw this article recently from the Forbes Mexico edition, and this is a digital translation of the article from March 6th, before International Women's Day. So the Mexican president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, he was elected in 2018 and was sworn into office in December of that year. And even before then, the knives were out for him. So conservatives were very unhappy that he was elected, and he won in landslide. And they were determined to even try to prevent him from taking office. But ever since he's taken office, there's been character assassinations, vicious misinformation, vicious information about him, lies. And he actually, if you look into his background, he probably was cheated out of being elected president of Mexico in 2006. So there was a lot of controversy, and it was suspected, and I'm sure there was rigging against him, and he was cheated out of being president then. But he's finally been elected, and he's very popular. He's had 80% approval rating, and even with all the campaigns to undermine his presidency, he still has a 62% approval rating, which is an approval rating that a lot of leaders would envy. Anyway, so International Women's Day has turned into something else. Um, so, as I've said, I've known about the regime change operation, the soft coup that's being attempted against AMLO since last year. So, for some time now, I've seen information about this. And this is a very good piece by a Mexican reporter, I believe. And it was published also in the Popular Resistance outlet. But this is the original. And it's just talking about the soft coup or silent coup, this reporter calls it, against AMLO. And it was I think a local Mexican outlet did an investigation. So, uh, so they've done this they mention here, they've done this in other countries in Latin America. So it says the scenario would be first to delegitimize AMLO and then oust him by means of campaigns and messages and media outlets, and through social media by organizing opposition groups and protests, provoking authorities, spreading fake news and rumors, among other maneuvers, similar to situations that happened recently in other Latin American countries such as Honduras, Argentina, and Brazil. And they do talk about, what I've talked about, So Gene Sharp was an academic. I call him. He was a CIA asset, and he perfected the color revolution, um, which is a regime change operation made to look like a popular uprising, basically. So he perfected it, and his first color revolution was in 1989 in Tiananmen Square, and he was actually there, and the Chinese government, they caught on to him and they kicked him out. Um, so Sharp realized that the sort of conventional coup d'états um, weren't as effective. So you see these color revolutions, or you will kind of see kind of a combination of a traditional coup and a color revolution, as we saw recently in Bolivia. Um, so yeah, so it does. I'm glad that they do mention Gene Sharp's work here. So this is what they're using against AMLO. So they've been calling him a dictator. They claim he's incompetent, and so the groups inside of Mexico, um, they mm, they get U.S. So this is a U.S. coup. This is a U.S. color revolution. So they funnel money into Mexico, and they have conservative politicians from the PAN, that's the Conservative Party, and former presidents Felipe Calderon and Vicente Fox. They were from that party, National Action Party. I think that's what PAN means, stands for. Um, Yeah, so they even will pretend to uh, be like the Yellow Vest movement. This is the problem. They will try to hijack things like the Yellow Vest movement, or pretend that they are like a Yellow Vest movement. So anyway, USAID is notorious for being a CIA front. So they funnel money into countries in Latin America and other countries around the world for regime change operations. USAID was actually banned in Bolivia when Evo Morales was president. So the U.S. government had to funnel money through Ecuadorian and Colombian NGOs. So and they funnel money into Venezuela and I'm sure into Nicaragua uh, and yeah, so the CIA's main NGO is the National Endowment for Democracy. So CIA regime change operations have been kind of privatized, neoliberalized. So these non-governmental organizations, or they're quasi non-governmental organizations, really. Cato Institute is another one. Um, so Koch brothers, one of them died, but anyway, Koch Industries, they fund Cato Institute. So Cato Institute is sort of a think tank for neoliberalism or libertarianism. Mention also Students for Liberty. Anyways, a very good article here about the soft coup. So this article is from July of last year. So I've known about this article and other information about the coup attempt against AMLO. So anyway, so he knows what's going on with the International Women's Day, and he calls. So he said they're conservatives disguised as feminists to attack him, and he's right. So he realizes they're using identity politics, and they're blaming him for violence against women. That's been a problem in Mexico for a long, long time. So for some reason, he's being blamed for this problem, whereas the conservative presidents were not blamed. I don't know how that works, but I know from experience, when I was in Cuba, men are very respectful of women, and women have a very high standing in Cuba. So in socialist countries, women are very respected. They have a higher than usual status. So anyway, it takes time to change a country, and AMLO hasn't been in office very long, but they're already attacking him as incompetent. Um, so yeah, the conservatives don't care about women's rights. They don't care about women, but they're manipulating women to protest AMLO. Um, yeah, and he has women in his government, so but they want to say that he's ignoring the plight of women and the violence against women. He's not. He's being scapegoated. So he's right to say, you should be talking about humanism. And really, the problem is the identity politics has been hijacked. So I know people who say, and I agree, this is what I always say: if you're not talking about class, if you're not trying to raise class consciousness, and you're only talking about identity politics, or if you focus on that, you're just playing into the whole neoliberal left cover, which uses identity politics as a left cover for their right wing agenda, basically. Anyway, so that's what's going on against AMLO. So the International Women's Day began. Um, I have to point out now, I have talked about the Women's March. So in 2017, what happened after the Women's March which was in response to Donald Trump's election, the Women's March in the US, and there are women's marches in other countries. So after the Women's March, which is in January of every year now since 2017, and I've done a number of videos about that, and even I called it a color revolution. I realize that's what's going on. It's a color revolution. It's an attempt to portray Donald Trump as some kind of anomaly when um, there are deep systemic problems that they are not addressing. And the Women's March is basically a front for the DNC, for the Democratic Party. Um, so I'll give links to my previous videos where I've talked about the Women's March and how it's turned into a color revolution. And they've even talked about violence. There is even talk of violence, and color revolutions inevitably become violent. So if Donald Trump is reelected, and he will be reelected because the Democrats are bound and determined to have Joe Biden as the nominee, and they would rather have Trump reelected than to have somebody who's populist, like AMLO's populist, Bernie Sanders is populist. So there could be violence. When Trump is reelected, I'm anticipating possible violence. And there was even an article talking about that there will be violence. So anyway, so I'm low. I'm kind of. I didn't really have very high expectations for him when he was elected because they called him the Mexican Bernie. And he's not real. He's just sort of left of center. He's not extreme, but the conservatives in Mexico and the U.S. government can't stand it when any government just doesn't do everything for the free markets. The free markets. So he has been pumping more. He's been putting more money into social programs, and I know the oil industry is not happy with him because he's been exerting more state that it's a state asset, and that money should go to the Mexican people. He's canceled some projects that a lot of the big businessmen in Mexico wanted. So his priority is to help the people, and he's very popular as a result. So the Women's Day, the Women's March, after the Women's March, so when March 8th came around in 2017, they started this uh, Day Without Women is what it was called. So they turned International Women's Day into Day Without Women. And I'm not sure. I think it's a suggestion that, about reference to women who are missing because of violence or whatever. But you know who is behind the Day Without Women? And sometimes it's called just International Women's Day, Day Without Women. Sometimes it's just called 8M for the 8th of March, the date, because it's kind of a mouthful. International Women's Day, Day Without Women. So guess what? You know who's behind the Day Without Women? It's George Soros. I know this is Fox News, and some people are going to say, oh, but it's Fox News. Well, you can find this information other sources, I'm sure. Yeah. So um, so the Day Without Women is supposed to be sort of a strike, mass protest. And yeah, so he likes to pump in a lot of money into these psyops and opposition groups. So he's known for funding Antifa, and he channels his money very carefully. But people know where the money's coming from. And yeah, he doesn't. Soros does not like people like AMLO, and he doesn't like Trump because Hillary was his favorite candidate. So, feminists being used against AMLO. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. So, there's been, let's see what other, a lot of images I want to show you here. Here's one. So, this is an image from Mexico, and um, and the women in Mexico have been disrobing, basically bearing their breasts. I even saw a large, morbidly obese woman in Mexico completely disrobe and parade through the streets. So that's how they're protesting. So this woman has even made her little girl remove her top. She's topless and she's wearing like a pussy hat mask. And it's kind of funny because when I posted um, a one of the videos on Twitter about the protests in Mexico and how they were being violent, the women were being violent as they were protesting. Scott Creighton of the Church Dog 42 channel said it's a regular pussy riot, and he's right because see, here's the mask, pussy riot mask. So a couple of videos from Twitter, if they come up, if they load. Yeah, here we go. Here's one. So it says this is from NBC News. Thousands in Mexico City protest against gender-based violence for International Women's Day. So I think I'm going to turn the sound off here. So you see the image. So they're setting fire to, I'm not sure, it might be a government building or something. I don't know. So this is, and when I saw this, a lot of the images are reminding me of Hong Kong. So I've talked a lot about Hong Kong and that color revolution. See, and the black mask. See, they're dressed in black, black mask, very reminiscent. Yeah, vandalizing. Um, Very reminiscent of Hong Kong and all the destruction there. So that's not like a yellow vest protest. A yellow vest, they simply march through the streets, chant and sing. This is what a color revolution looks like when you're riding. hmm This, this is a color revolution. And they're not fighting for fighting against inequality. I mean, economic inequality. They're fighting, demanding women's rights, very in vague terms. Um, that's one image. I have another one here. Here's another one. So these are women protesting and vandalizing a Catholic church. Turn the sound off here. Sorry. There we go. I would blow this up, but I'm not sure I would play right. So anyway, they're vandalizing a Catholic church. So been a lot of ones vandalizing, very destructive. They've been so violent. So there have been a lot of female police officers in the streets trying to control the rioting, and they have been assaulted and gotten badly hurt. So very much like Hong Kong, very much like Hong Kong. Yeah, yeah. So that's yeah. A lot of them dressed in black. Okay. Now there's another video I'd like to play from Facebook. This is good. Now you see the black. They're dressed in black. This reminds me so much of a Hong Kong. And we all know that CIA and MI6 and a whole whack of regime change NGOs are in Hong Kong, destabilizing Hong Kong, or they've been destabilizing Hong Kong even. Well, they've been terrorizing people there and been making bombs, exploding bombs there. They're very dangerous now. Okay, I'll play some of this. Yeah, see, they're vandalizing monuments and buildings and yes, yeah, monuments. They're vandalizing. See, dressed in black, dressed in black, dressed in black, tearing down street sign. Yeah, dressed in black, dressed in black. This is what a color revolution looks like. This is what a color revolution looks like. And a lot of them are wearing these green bandanas. They wear these bandanas with yeah, here we go. Feminicida. Feminicida. I don't know if that's dressed in black. So I guess they've assaulted this man. And red paint on him. I don't know. Yeah, assaulting men. Some of them were wearing those helmets that remind me of Hong Kong too. Not all of you. Yeah. Cops have actually been women in the streets here. Yeah. You can see there are a lot of female cops there going in. Yeah, these are female cops. Yeah, this is what a color revolution looks like. So it's a protest against violence against women, against violence on women, but the protesters are assaulting female cops. Now that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'm amazed, all the female cops, so says a lot about Mexico. Yeah, look at this. This is just like Hong Kong. Yeah. So, um, I think they actually got a lot of people, a lot of women in the streets for this protest. A lot of them are wearing the helmets. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Okay. Anyway, I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. Anyway. Okay. Um so the women protesting, claiming that AMLO is not respecting women's rights. And it is so bad. This is from CNN, Spanish, Espanol. And this is another digital translation, but basically they're this panel of women, and they're saying, they want to install a female president, that they won't have a real voice as women until there's a female president in Mexico. And actually, that's what they did in Bolivia. In Bolivia, there's a female president, but she's a right wing fascist. That that was a U.S. coup in Bolivia, and they installed a right wing fascist leader there. So this International Women's Day Without Women protests, they've been going on every year since 2017. And they have been used, women's protests have been used in other Latin American countries in an attempt to overthrow countries. And in one of the other Latin American countries where they have tried to do this is in Nicaragua. So this is an article from 2018 about the protests in Nicaragua against violence against women, about femicides. I have to explain this website. I'm familiar with it, and I've learned what it's really about. It's called the Havana Times Open-Minded Writing from Cuba. It's actually the guy who runs it. His name is Circle Robinson. He used to work in Cuba, and I think he was kicked out of the country for being counter-revolutionary. So he lost his job and had to leave. He was writing counter-revolutionary material about Cuba, but still gets. So he publishes this in Nicaragua, and he gets contributors from inside of Cuba to submit articles for this outlet, Havana Times. So it's counter-revolutionary, and it has this article from 2018 about Nicaragua women protest against wave of femicides. So people in Nicaragua are very familiar with what was going on in 2018. So the U.S. routinely uses women and minorities, indigenous people in Latin American countries for regime change. And they tried this in 2018 in the failed coup in Nicaragua. So this was probably in conjunction with that International Women's Day, or Day Without Women, or 8M. And it's going on once again in Nicaragua. So the trouble has already started in Nicaragua. So the U.S., they had a failed coup in Venezuela last year. They're trying again. They're going to try again. They had a failed coup in Nicaragua in 2018. So they're trying once again, and they're using women. They have paid assets. They pay them. And then they kind of brainwash other women to take part. So this is indeed about protests on March 8th and 9th in Nicaragua, and the government, they know what's going on, and so the police were trying to I'm sure that all they were doing was stopping the violence and the vandalism, because I don't think the government there will actually stop people from legitimately protesting, but they are not going to tolerate. They know what these protests are. They know what's going on. And so there were protests like this. What was interesting, Nicaraguan women marched in Costa Rica, in a neighboring country. So you know who the Nicaraguan women outside of Nicaragua, these are regime change assets. So they were protesting, uh, marching, marching about the status of women in Nicaragua. So in other Latin American countries, and I know in Chile there have been genuine anti-neoliberal protests um, there, but there have been some elements inserted, identity politics, to kind of hijack that. Another funny thing here in this article, it mentions this Janine Áñez, the puppet president in Bolivia. And what's hilarious is that let's see, she, so women protested in Bolivia, and she, her government, really, announced that they were investing $100 million into protecting women, the victims of violence. Well, in fascist U.S. puppet regimes in Latin America, they don't respect women. So I think this is kind of a joke. Um, yeah. So she made a big deal at an International Women's Day event. I'm not buying it. Not buying it at all. Yeah, here's Mexico. So they're talking about Mexico. Uh, so that's, yeah, 8M. There's the 8M. That's what they call it sometimes. So, yeah, these are psyops. So, this is to get women into the streets. But they use this specifically against leftist governments, to overthrow them. And they're trying that in Mexico with AMLO. And they're doing this again in Nicaragua. And it's so convincing that even women in countries like Nicaragua who have seen this before, they're fooled and they think they're legitimate protests. So, they know, or they should know, but it's so convincing. And they brainwash so many people, so many women, and suckered them into protesting against their interests because, once again, if they're not protesting for economic justice, um, and against neoliberal economic policies that impose austerity, they're not legitimate. So that's all I know about that. Um, I think that's it, except I wanted to throw in one more thing. I'm sorry if this drags on, but I saw this. So this is another International Women's Day event with Ingrid Betancourt. Now, Ingrid Betancourt was known for being kidnapped by FARC terrorists some years ago and being rescued. Well, that whole thing, I've looked into that. That's kind of suspicious. It was to, I think, partly to demonize FARC when the real terrorists have been the right wing governments in Colombia and in Latin America. And so I think that was some kind of psyop or stunt from what I've read. Anyway, so she's in Stockholm here, and she's a dual French Colombian citizen. But what was interesting at this event, so this is a channel that I subscribe to. Basically it's a Iranian opposition. It's an MEK cult channel. So an MEK is a cult. Bizarre, very disturbing things what they do to the members. But anyway, they strictly segregate men and women. So it's kind of weird that there are these. So it says here, Iranian supporters of the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, or MEK, and the National Council of Resistance of Iran is just an MEK front, really. It's just another MEK organization. But they were at this event for International Women's Day. MEK cult members. So MEK, they're a CIA asset, regime change asset. So I thought that was very interesting. The fact that Ingrid Betancourt was at this event where there were MEK members in Stockholm. Anyway, so that shows you, I hope that shows you that International Women's Day, it has socialist origins, but now it's being used against left wing governments to overthrow them. And it's being used as a color revolution psyop, like the Women's March, Democratic Party psyop. So International Women's Day has turned into Day Without Women or just 8M. It's a color revolution that's being used against AMLO. Even though he's very, very popular. So, yeah. So it's interesting the connection too between the MEK and this International Women's Day. Anyway, identity politics is really dangerous stuff. It's very shallow. People march that stuff out all the time. Identity politics, you're talking about women, minorities. But if you're not talking about class consciousness, and class divisions and inequality, economic inequality, that sort of thing, it's not a genuine protest movement. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your patience. And I will talk to you again soon. Bye.